Hello, my people. Nnamdi Kanu pens down a strong letter to Donald Trump. In a strong-worded letter from detention, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, the leader of indigenous people of Biafra, has appealed directly to the US President Donald Trump, asking for urgent international intervention in what he describes as a hidden genocide targeting Christians and the Igbo people in Nigeria's southeast. The letter links Trump's recent threats of US action against Nigeria with Kanu's own account of suffering and appeals for self-determination. Of course, we will just hit point to point on what Nnamdi Kanu hinted out in that letter. What did Kanu address in that letter? He begins by recognizing the Judeo-Christian faith and values shared with Trump and recalls attending Trump's 2020 campaign event in Iowa. He cites Trump's October 31st, 2025 declaration that the US was prepared to act militarily and cut aid if Nigeria fails to protect its Christian populations, calling the declaration both bold and hope-igniting. Kanu also asserts that the threat to Christians in Nigeria goes beyond the north. It has metastasized into the Igbo heartland, the southeast, and is being carried out under the guise of counter-terrorism. Kanu also accuses extremist groups active in northern Nigeria, such as Boko Haram, ISWAP, and Fulani militia, of also operating in the southeast, but argues that in this region, the Nigerian military itself is the primary perpetrators, shaded by a narrative that blames victims. Kanu lists specific incidents alleged as evidence. The Mpo Biafra Hero Day massacre, which happened on May 30, 2016. This report, according to Kanu, include at least 150 peaceful Christian worshippers unalived, bodies dumped in rivers. He also hinted about the Aba High School massacre, which happened on 9 February 2016. He quotes Amnesty International: 22 unalived on site, 13 bodies exhumed from a burial pit, children executed for singing Sweet Jesus. Nnamdi Kanu cited the famous Operation Python Dams, which took place between 12 to 14 September 2017. He claims over 150 were unalived. In raid on his home in Afarogu, no soldiers died. Nnamdi Kanu also cited the famous Obibo massacre, which took place on October 2020, mentioned as part of the series of alleged atrocities. He went further to account his personal ordeal. He claims to have survived 4 documented attempts on his life since 2015. He states that on 20th June 2021, he was forcibly abducted from Kenya in an extraordinary rendition into Nigeria, allegedly violating Kenya and international law. Kanu says that on 13th October 2022, the Nigerian Court of Appeal acquitted him and ruled his rendition was illegal, yet he remains in solitary detention in Abuja over 1,596 days. That is 5 years plus, I think. Nnamdi Kanu alleged that the detention violates constitutional safeguards, double jeopardy under Section 369 of the 1999 Constitution, Article 72 of the African Charter, and that the Union Working Group on Arbitrary Detention declared his imprisonment arbitrary, unlawful, and politically motivated. Kanu accuses the federal government of Nigeria of weaponizing insecurity to demonize IPOB by first declaring IPOB a terrorist group, despite what he calls zero evidence of violence. He quotes the US State Department 2021. Secondly, using unknown government attacks via state-backed militia, then attributing blame to IPOB. Thirdly, unaliving over 2,000 Igbo youths in counter-terror operations between 2021 to 2025, citing Inter-Society. Kanu makes clear 4 major requests to Trump. Number 1, Kanu says, launch a US-led independent inquiry into the state-sponsored massacre of Judeo-Christians in eastern Nigeria with full access to mass graves, military logs, survivor testimonies. Secondly, convene emergency congressional hearing on what he calls Igbo Christian genocide, featuring the Court of Appeal judgment on 30th October 2022. UN Colamat's report, Nigeria's defense of its own constitution. Third, Kanu also requested impose targeted sanctions via the US Magnitsky Act on Nigerian officials. For example, Lieutenant General Toko Yusuf Buratai, ambassador to Benin, current Director General of DSS, Yusuf Bichi, Southeast military commanders associated with Igbo massacre. Fourth, support an internationally supervised referendum on self-determination for the Igbo people, which he calls the only peaceful path to ending this cycle of violence, referencing the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. Nnamdi Kanu closes with a moral appeal. History will judge us by what we do. When genocide knocks, you have the power to stop a second Rwanda in Africa. One tweet, one sanction, one inquiry could save millions. He reaffirms his and IPOB's commitment to peace, faith, and non-violence, even from a prison cell, and says they seek only justice, truth, and freedom. Now, let's give a glimpse of analysis to this Nnamdi Kanu's letter. Nnamdi Kanu's open letter to Donald Trump is not just an appeal. It is a strategic political move with both domestic and international implications. From a political angle, this letter serves three purposes. First, international legitimacy. By writing directly to a global figure like Donald Trump, especially one known for his outspoken defense of Christians, Kanu is trying to, internationalize his case once again. He wants to move it from a purely Nigerian legal issue to a global human rights concern. Secondly, moral positioning. The tone of the letter frames Kanu as a peaceful, faith-driven, freedom advocate rather than a separatist militant. It's an attempt to actually shift public perception from rebel leader to political prisoner and victims of state persecution. Thirdly, pressure tactics. The letter indirectly pressure both the Nigerian government and the international community, especially the US Congress and human rights organization. Of course, we all know that as of today, Nigerian government is under heavy pressure regarding the threats of Donald Trump. Now, what impact does this letter have on the ongoing Kanu's trial? In the short term, the letter may not directly affect the legal proceedings in Abuja since Nigerian courts operate under domestic law. It is a problem. However, politically and diplomatically, it could increase the international scrutiny on Nigeria's judiciary and detention practices. That alone could make the government more cautious in how the case proceeds. It would also galvanize local and diaspora support, potentially leading to renewed protests, petitions, and media coverage. And lastly, it would also complicate the government's image abroad, especially if Trump or any USA lawmaker echoes concern about the detention of Nnamdi Kanu. That being said, it could also backfire internally. Some officials may view the letter as foreign interference or an attempt to embarrass Nigeria internationally, which might harden the government stance temporarily. But then, what happens if Donald Trump doesn't respond? If Trump stays silent, several scenarios emerge. First, symbolic victory. Even without a response, the letter has already served its purpose. It's trending, raising awareness and putting the issue back on global radar. Secondly, political loneliness. A lack of reply might underscore how isolated Kanu's movement has become internationally, possibly, discouraging some of his followers. Third, strategic patience. Kanu could still benefit from the mere association. Invoking Trump's name keeps the conversation alive among US conservatives and faith groups who might later pick up the cause. So the question is Trump actually going to, take up this letter? In essence, Nnamdi Kanu's letter is a high-risk, high-reward diplomatic gambit. If it triggers global attention, it could strengthen, his case morally and politically. But if ignored, it may only deepen his frustration and reinforce the Nigerian government's argument that is seeking external manipulation. Still, it sends a clear message. Let's also remember, there's been a report that the IPOB movement is actually responsible for whatever data that have been, served to Donald Trump, which led to him, sanctioning Nigeria and also the threat that follows suit. Still, this also sent a clear message. The battle for justice in Kanu's case is no longer confined to the courtroom. It is now being fought on the global stage of public opinion. What do you think about this? Conclusively, this letter by Mazi Nnamdi Kanu is a sweeping appeal, intervening allegation of mass human rights abuses, legal irregularities, calls for international intervention, and a push for the self-determination of the Igbo people, whether one accepts all the claims or disputes part of them. The document raises serious questions about the state of law, the role of the military and security agencies in the southeast of Nigeria for the past how many years, and also the willingness of the external actors to engage, to know what is happening, the investigation and all that. For the international community and for the Nigeria itself, the stakes are very high at this moment. The narrative of existential threat to a religious stroke ethnic group, if left unaddressed, has both moral and geopolitical implications. As viewers, you all want to keep an eye on whether the Washington response, whether Abuja addresses the allegation publicly, and whether this later sparks broader parliamentary, legal or diplomatic actions. Let's keep our eyes on the ball. Thank you for watching. This has been Abel Perspectives, your domain for unfiltered news and raw political analysis. I bring to you the story that demand our attention. Don't forget to like, share, leave your comment, and of course, subscribe for the next episode.